Okay. As chairperson of the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee, I hereby call this meeting to order at 12 o'clock p.m. At this time, the committee welcomes any public comment, issues, or concerns not on the regular agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the committee, begin by stating their name and address or single-member district number, and limit their remarks to less than 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'm Kay Brown, residing in District 2. I've been fostering for Concho Valley Paws for right at a year. I'm here hoping to bring attention and get an open discussion to work towards spay-neuter being enforced. The City of San Angelo has an ordinance mandating spay-neuter for domestic pets in place since 2015, 8 years. The city should already be walking the path of enforcement and education of an 8-year-old ordinance. Education to the public on ordinances that are being blatantly ignored should be in place, just like the lock it, hide it, take it public announcements for vehicle theft. The numbers I'm going to share show we aren't getting to that no-kill point while still being able to continue the daily intake of domestic pets uninterrupted at the city shelter and the rescues. Preventing unwanted puppies is preferred. I came to foster with Concho Valley Paws last year during the city's very public crisis. Along with many other fosters and volunteers, we all saw the crisis they face daily, and the puppies and unaltered dogs keep coming in. I fostered 6 to forever homes, and during that time, 300 puppies came in. A common concern being the number of unaltered dogs and dogs with no microchips, also a city ordinance, being taken in at the city shelter. I submitted a public information request to get a clearer picture of how animal services enforce spay-neuter ordinances. Shelter numbers from 2022 as of June 2023. 956 dogs and cats were claimed. 282 were altered at intake. 24 exempt or deceased, and wait for it, 44 of 650 pets provided proof of spay-neuter after impound. 606 still report unaltered, 400 had a complaint filed, and all had been released to owners. 206 are out there unaltered, more than the city's current capacity. In 2022 and 23, 10 breeder permits were issued in total, most to a single breed of dogs that populates a high percentage of the shelter numbers. And they were issued to individuals who had an impounded dog, also an ordinance violation. Purpose stated by owner for not altering personal use, no monetary gain for the puppies. What happens to those puppies after 4 months, on to 6 months, the most mischievous age? Where do they end up? Let me leave with the thought, half the battle has been gifted to us. If a male dog is proudly displaying his birth package, he hasn't been neutered. A citation ticket could be issued to the owner of the residence or to the adult on the other end of a leash. Please, let's work together, get the at-large dog population reduced, and stop the suffering of dogs on the streets looking for shelter, food, and water. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Susan Perry. I live at 266 Buffalo Lane. I am a volunteer for Concho Valley Paws. I primarily foster large breed dogs. I doubt most of you were here as part of the process 8 years ago when the spay-neuter microchip ordinances were put into effect. I would like to highlight a few of the reasons that Mr. Flores gave the City Council to justify the need for spay-neuter microchip. At that time, the shelter was taking in about 10,000 animals per year and euthanizing about 7,000 of them, which is just scary to think about. One unaltered female cat and its offspring can produce 420,000 cats in 7 years. and one unaltered dog and its offspring can produce 67,000 dogs in 6 years. 85% of animals hit by cars are unaltered, and at that time it was costing $71 a day for the intake of an animal at the shelter, which I'm sure in 8 years has gone up significantly. The public was informed of the ordinances and given 6 months to comply. Well, the population of San Angelo has increased significantly, and there are a lot of people that are not aware of spay-neuter microchip ordinances, or they choose to ignore it or think it doesn't affect them. We have to do a better job. The dogs running loose all over town. It's not just 1 or 2 neighborhoods anymore. It is a citywide problem. I am hoping that this committee will get together and go to the city council, the communications department of the city, and see if public service announcements can be done to raise people's awareness that there are spay-neuter microchip ordinances in this town, and maybe a list of fines so that they would know what it's going to cost them if they do not comply. So far this year, January through June, there have been over 1,200 animals enter the shelter. About 40% of the dogs and 10% of the cats were claimed. If all of these animals had been microchipped, they could have potentially found the owners and made those pet owners responsible for their pets, instead of becoming a shelter statistic. 234 dogs approximately are now being housed between the shelter and Concho Valley Paws. 30% of them are under the age of 1. So far this year, 238 puppies have gone through the shelter, and that is a huge problem. We need enforcement, and the quality of life in San Angelo is being affected, because it says a lot about your quality if you are afraid to walk your own dog in your own neighborhood or in city parks. Thank you.
I'm Mary Wilson, and I reside at 1641 Parkview Drive. I am also a director of Concho Valley Paws and have been for almost 20 years. We have clearly identified that there are problems. Now, how do we resolve them? To me and hundreds of concerned citizens, this is an issue that simply must be addressed. San Angelo has turned a blind eye to the plight of shelter animals far too long. We know, as evident by the sheer number of animals impounded, especially puppies, it is only a matter of time until our community will be forced back to the policies of capture and kill. As a taxpayer and a homeowner, I do not support killing for space, and I am not alone. I want my tax dollars going towards humane care and solutions that save lives, prevent suffering, and places the responsibility back on the irresponsible people who created this situation. I make the following recommendations to be considered by this committee. Appoint a group of animal welfare professionals and volunteers to review the ordinances of our community with other communities that have successfully addressed overpopulation concerns. Allow this group to make recommendations to animal services in an advisory capacity. This group would advise your council on drafting new ordinances with the oversight of the city's attorneys. There are people here willing to help. Seek a budget amendment that would allow animal services to employ an animal control officer for the specific purpose of investigating problem breeding, ads for sale of pets, and enforcing the spay-neuter ordinance. This enforcement would be from the first ticket to compliance. It would be this officer's job to follow up with all pet owners found to be in violation until compliance is achieved, even after the court has heard the case and assessed fines. Our research has shown follow-through of the violators is significantly lacking. Adjustments to the ordinances allowing breeding permits to exclude permits for pit bulls and large breed dogs, as the shelter population is evidence that our community demographics do not support the breeding of large breed dogs. We are a community of senior citizens, apartment dwellers, and a transient population of college students, military personnel, and renters. Small to medium dogs do not languish in our city shelter, but large breed dogs do, especially the pit and pit mixes. They are incredibly wonderful dogs, and they deserve so much more. Adjustments to the existing ordinances that would allow breeding permits to be revoked if an unaltered animal is impounded by animal control more than once. Work with shelter management to advise on policies and procedures which would ensure that 100% of the violations are reported to municipal court. These are just a few of the proposals I would like you to consider. I appreciate you seeing our public comments for what they are. Please to let us help you in finding solutions rather than more rescuers complaining that you are not doing enough. This is a complex situation, one that we have learned we cannot kill our way out or adopt our way out, but we can spay-neuter our way out. We are all in this together. Humans created this situation, and we humans must find a solution. We can do better. San Angelo.
Thank you. There being no more public comments, or seeing no further public comment, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as published. Okay. All in favor? She seconded. Oh, my bad. First.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There it goes.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And we will go to 3A, consider approving the April 2023 Animal Shelter Advisory Committee. Goodness gracious, I cannot speak today, I'm so sorry. To approve the minutes.
We actually, the minute action just taken was for 3A and B for consent. You're okay.
So sorry.
So we will,
Okay.
if it's agreeable, we'll start with the regular agenda at
Okay.
4A.
So we'll go to regular agenda 4A, discussion and possible action related to monthly shelter numbers for April 2023.
So when we last met in April, we were about halfway through the month, and so since we have achieved month end, we can let you know how we fared in April. We love this infographic that reports on cats and dogs. Of course, we are, excuse me, intaking other species as well. So this is a good snapshot about the vast majority of our operations. We had 174 cats and dogs taken in the month of April. You'll see dogs there listed in the green bar columns, cats in the blue bar columns. Of course, the vast majority of that were animals identified as stray on intake. In that next box there in the middle, you'll see our outgoing animals. We had 44 dogs adopted, 15 cats, 52 dogs returned to owner, 8 cats, 7 dogs transferred out, 31 cats. That's largely the SNR program being pulled by Concho Valley Paws. We had 4 dogs and 2 cats euthanized, and 1 dog and 1 cat died on the premises. So with that, with those outcomes, we achieved a 93.84% live release rate for the month of April. When you consider all the species we took in, we ended our month with 174 dogs on site, 14 cats, so quite low for cats. We had not really begun kitten season in earnest, so there were a record low number of cats on the premises. This does provide the detail at the all species level, but by and large, April was a good month for performance. It's our 8th month in a row of achieving 93% or better. So fiscal year to date, we were at about 94% of animals released alive.
Are there any questions from any of the committee members? Any public comment on this item? Okay. And we just ask that you state your name and address or single-member district and limit your remarks to less than 3 minutes.
My name is Susan Perry, live at 266 Buffalo Lane, and I have a question about the intake of animals at the shelter. I keep hearing from different avenues of the public that the shelter is closed. There was, over this past weekend, occasion where there were 2 pit bulls hanging outside the dog park. Those people had to call the police to come and escort them back to their apartments because they were afraid they were going to be attacked. The dogs apparently had already growled at somebody. They called the shelter, and the report was that the police called the shelter and nobody came because the shelter is closed for intake. Now, Concho Valley Paws will adopt out 10 dogs, and they're still taking in 12. So I guess I'm looking for some kind of an explanation on what dogs you're taking in and what dogs you're not taking in. Because somewhere along the line, there's a disconnect there. I know that puppies are being left in cardboard boxes all over town, or just whole litters of puppies dumped in somebody else's neighborhood. You know, get them out of the vehicle and then just drive off and leave them. And I understand that those have to make it to the shelter, but there are so many dogs running the streets right now that are not being picked up by animal control. And so I understand there's no room at the inn, but we have to do something with the dogs that are out there. So that's it.
Thank you. Okay. Any other public comment? Okay. Moving on to agenda item 4B, discussion and possible action related to monthly shelter numbers for May 2023.
So you'll see the increase in intake in May. A lot of that is cats. So our new arrivals for the month of May were 239 cats and dogs. 113 of that were stray cats. So kitten season had officially started in our area. A number of those, of course, were identified for spay, neuter, and return through Concho Valley Paws Clinic, and we were able to put those animals right back where they were to prevent reproduction. 89 stray dogs came in, 10 dogs owner surrendered, 1 cat owner surrendered, 14 dogs seized as part of some kind of animal services officer case, and 12 cats seized in a similar fashion. For the outgoing animals, we had 69 dogs adopted, 17 cats, 42 dogs returned to owner, 11 cats, 28 dogs transferred out to rescue, 33 cats. And you do see our euthanasia going up for the month of May. We did have 9 dogs euthanized for aggression, 7 cats euthanized for illness or injury, and 5 cats dying on the premises related to illness. So we ended the month with 172 dogs on the premises, 72 cats, so a large increase from April, where we ended at 14 cats. And so for the month of May, with that increase in euthanasia, we ended the month at 89.64% of animals released alive. And it is in line with trend that with May, with a busier intake and hectic time, that it would decrease our live release rate in that fashion. So more detail there that would include all our species, including wildlife and livestock. Of course, 24 wildlife were released as healthy animals ready to be returned to the field. So year-to-date, we are sitting at about 93% at end of May of year-to-date live release rate.
Are there any questions or comments from committee members? Okay. And any public comment on this item? Okay. Moving to agenda item 4C, discussion and possible action related to monthly shelter numbers for June 2023.
So for the month of June, this will have an administrative update. So we had 223 cats and dogs coming in, about even with 102 stray dogs and 90 stray cats. For the outgoing animals, you'll note that we have a small change there where we're no longer logging those adoptions. With Concho Valley Paws as their own standalone organization, it makes sense to simply transfer animals out to them when they are moved to foster or pulled for adoption. And so instead of seeing one section for animals that are adopted and one section for animals that are transferred out, all of that is now reported under transfers as of June 1st. So for our outgoing animals, we had 48 dogs returned to owner, 16 cats, 107 dogs transferred to rescue, a good bit of that directly to Paws for adoption, and 58 cats. We had 11 dogs euthanized, 9 for aggression and 2 for illness or injury, and 12 cats euthanized for illness or injury, and 14 cats that died in custody. As we continue month 2 of kitten season, we are seeing really vulnerable sick kittens coming in beyond treatment. So that is reported there. So we ended the month of June open for intake at 168. Of course, our finite dog capacity is 180, and we close for intake at 170 unless dangerous or a danger to themselves. So we ended June open for intake at 168 dogs on site and 85 cats. For the 11 dogs listed as other, those are dogs in home quarantine, off-site quarantine, either at the vet clinic at the owner's expense or in a home quarantine. And so under Paws, you'll see 0 listed there simply because we no longer carry those animals on our record. We transfer them out when they leave our facility, which makes a lot more sense. This is just the first month you're seeing that activity. So about 30, we're reporting 223 cats and dogs in, and another 30 of other animals, either livestock or wildlife. So a live release rate of 87%, a little less than May, but again, in these busier, more hectic months, it is unfortunately common that May, June, July, and into August, we would have poorer performance. That is pretty standard for us historically, as well as most shelters in the South.
Are there any questions or comments from committee members on this item? And any public comment on this item? Okay. There being none, I'd like to move to agenda item 4D, discussion and possible action related to monthly shelter numbers for July 2023.
So July, of course, being our most recently finished month. We just closed the books on July a couple weeks ago. So our cat and dog intake was at 170 animals total. 77 were stray dogs, 67 cats. 3 dogs were owner surrendered, 1 cat. 20 dogs were seized as part of any animal services officer case, and 2 cats. And we had another 28 intake of other species, livestock and wildlife. We had 38 Dogs returned to owner, 31 cats. We did see a shift in transitioning some of our SNR program to be administered through the city through donated funds. So some of that 31 cat, a good bit of that 31 cats returned to owner are cats running through the city's SNR program. That program had been defunded a couple of years ago, but we were able to collect some donated funds to continue that service. 47 dogs were transferred out either to local rescue or transport, 10 cats. You see our euthanasia actually decreased for July, which is remarkable. 4 dogs and 4 cats euthanized. 1 dog died on the premises. It came in quite injured, and even with reaching out for medical support, it did die in custody. And then 15 cats died in custody, which were all neonatal kittens. So we ended the month with 186 dogs on site. Of course, our capacity is 180 dogs. In the event of an exigent circumstance like an emergency, a crisis, there are times that we can exceed 180 dogs for a short period of time, and that is where we ended the July 31st, that we had 7 days to be over 180 while we mobilized for life-saving efforts. And we did do that and met the deadline really August 1st. We were back under 180. It's just an odd month that we're reporting that we are over capacity for a moment, but we were able to trigger an exigent circumstance to allow for life-saving and create that window. And then 95 cats on site, and then 2 dogs off-site. That would be in off-site quarantine for a rabies observation. So for July, we had an 84% live release rate. I'm sorry, there it is. And so that's our worst performance to date. But again, July is traditionally a really tough month for adoptions. Even our owner redemptions were low for the month. We usually try to hit about 100 for that. So it is, and the 2 adoptions listed there are actually livestock adoptions that we had placed. So the cat and dog adoptions, of course, are handled through Concho Valley Paws and now in that transferred out column. But livestock, we do still administer those adoptions. So you'll see the odd livestock adoption in your monthly reports as they come up. And that was after assisting with an eviction that included livestock. So year to date as of July, so 10 months into the fiscal year now, we're sitting at 92% live release rate, so still quite strong performance there.
Are there any questions or comments from committee members?
I do. During this reporting period, or maybe even year-to-date, I'm sure maybe some from the public may want to know, but I was just kind of curious on the euthanasia rate. Sometimes we see a call out for animals due to housing, to be fostered or to be adopted so that they don't have to be euthanized. Are those reflected in any of those numbers, or is there, instead of just being aggressive, is there anything where the reason for euthanasia is due to housing?
Right, so to date, we've not euthanized for capacity. Each time that we share an urgent plea that these faces must be moved by a deadline to make space, we're saving them. And so you'll see that activity in that transfers out column. And in July, we did share such a post because we did hit capacity 3 different times in July, including that one at month end where we had an exigent circumstance with a large intake. So there would be, in that bottom middle section where it says euthanasia breakdown, when and if we would have to euthanize for space, there would be a separate line. Instead of that first line, there would of course be the first line listing animals euthanized for aggression, the next line listing animals euthanized for illness or injury, then there would be a third line listing this animal was euthanized for space.
Okay. I just wanted to
Yeah.
see if that was.
Are there any other committee comments? Any public comment on this item? Okay. Just remember to please state your name and address or your single-member district number and limit your remark to less than 3 minutes.
I'm Kay Brown, and I live in District 2. I'm surprised seeing these graphics and it being an ordinance for animals being spayed and neutered, that there is no reference to the animals that came in that were already altered or the reference to people complying with the after their pet has been impounded. It also feels a little bit that the focus is a percentage number, that we're hitting a certain percentage to get an animal out of the shelter, rather than hitting the front side of education and enforcement of the ordinance that's already been in place. So I guess that's something I would like to see moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Okay. There being none, I'd like to move to agenda item 4E, discussion and consider adopting the revised coordinated intake policy for owners wishing to surrender their pets.
So in our early years of trying for life first and seeking life-saving options for animals before euthanizing for space, we adopted a policy related to owned pets, that owners would need to go through some kind of process to owners surrender their pet to our facility. So that policy was adopted in April 2019, and since that time, I mean, over 4 years now, additional resources have been developed. The capacity policy being set in October was really meaningful to how this affects owners of pets, and really changes those opportunities that are available. And so it's definitely time for this to come back to the committee to revise that policy and have a better document built out to reflect our current operations. So first, the policy that is attached in your background encourages dialogue. That first we started with a conversation about the reason wanting to rehome the pet. Of course, our goal is always to maintain the human-animal bond. It's been our standard practice for always thinking that, you know, the best case scenario for a pet in my facility is adoption. And except for those most extreme circumstances that are cruelty, most of the pets in the city's facility would prefer to go back to their owners if it's a safe and appropriate home to be in, where they already know the rules and already know what's expected of them. And we'd like to encourage such owners to do so. And so we would express that and try to offer rehoming solutions that can be deployed before a shelter intake is considered, just reserving those taxpayer dollars for the city's facility to be for those most vulnerable pets, offering that evaluation and solutions, and recommend, you know, the most common reasons for being called in, that they want to rehome the pet, try to vet all of that in that first interaction to match them with whatever program makes sense. We would still ask for owners to participate in Concho Valley Paws programming to get connected with that, but it would ultimately be a city shelter supervisor that would be the person approving whether that pet comes in. It's just, you know, can you take advantage of all of these things? You know, do what we're asking of you. Also ask if there's any programming with Paws that you qualify for, and we would ask for them to do that work ahead of time. It would, of course, depend on kennel space availability. It would depend on the originating location of the animal. Certainly, if it's one of our pets that we've seen before and know this family, then that would take priority. And then any shelter supervisor, including myself, can be the one signing off on that intake. And the owner would be responsible for paying all fees, like the $10 owner surrender fee and impound fee for that animal to come in. So the main change from the old policy is the old policy required Concho Valley Paws approval, and that doesn't really make sense anymore with the new capacity and our constant changing daily restrictions on how many animals we can have on site. One component of the policy also outlines the need for a responsible, humane euthanasia, that there are times that folks are reaching out to us and saying, you know, some of these common issues can be worked through. But if they're calling in and the dog has a bite history or has unprovoked reactivity towards family members, then those are ones where we are going to ask the owner that part of pet ownership is being responsible to the community and your household and considering euthanasia in such circumstances. So there are other communities that I dialogue with that have, they do offer owner-requested euthanasia for a fee. That's not something that we really have the resources to take on at this time. We would just ask owners to do that at a private vet clinic at their own expense when an animal is at end of life or terminal illness or is having unprovoked, uninterrupted reactivity in the home. So that is what's before you today, is shifting that approval back to the city.
Before we take a motion on this, are there any committee comments? And any public comment on this item? And we just ask that you state your name, your address or single-member district, and limit your time.
Okay. I'm Jenny Wilson with Concho Valley Paws, and we requested this actually be looked at today, just basically for clarification for the community. The current policy shows that that Concho Valley Paws has to approve what animal can or may not enter the shelter. And I don't think that's a position that we necessarily need to be in, considering the space constraints that the shelter has and how that is managed. And so we, as a contracted partner, are very happy to continue providing the services of counseling to people who are looking to rehome their pets. It's through that conversation that we kind of determine what the issue is. Is it a training issue? Is it a behavior issue? Have they been evicted? Has the animal been left behind? And so there's lots of things that we have to offer to assist. But we do come across those situations where we don't have a program for them. And because we are committed to working with the shelter in adoption of shelter pets, we don't have readily available space to impound or take in these animals. So at that point, we have to refer it back to the shelter to see if they can potentially get on a wait list to surrender to the shelter. And this is because in the city of San Angelo, if you have an animal in your possession for 3 days, it becomes what is called an owner surrender because you are seen as the owner of the pet. And so where we have run into some issues with that is if we've seen an animal that has been left behind by a tenant and the landlord's been caring for it or a neighbor's been caring for it, then that question of is it an owned pet or not comes into play. And it's those individuals that may not be in a position to take advantage of the programs that we offer. But our programs we absolutely have programs that will address pretty much any issue that a pet owner has in regards to behavior, needing to rehome because they're moving, even death in the family. But there are those instances where it's just not an option because that person is not the original owner of the pet, or they took in a stray pet and kept it for too long and it doesn't work out with the family. So it's all those different kinds of scenarios that we're asking just to continue the counseling, but then refer them back to animal services to be considered for surrender when they have space available because we don't have any other options for them.
Any other public comment on this item? There being none, I'll entertain a motion to approve this consent or this agenda item as published. Okay. First from Member Aker. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Second from Member Murphy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And that concludes all regular agenda items. Do we have any follow-up or administrative issues to announce?
I just wanted to bring up some of the public may not recognize some familiar faces. And most of you already know I do work for the police department. And a while back, the shelter was donated the microchip readers, and they issued 4 readers to our department. Being new, it's taken the officers a little while to get used to some of them, but there are a couple officers that do like the devices. Unfortunately, it's trying to get the dog to come to us so we can do the reader. Just like most dogs are a little apprehensive about approaching new people. But we have been able to get a few of the dogs to come to us, and we have been successful in getting some microchips located and going through the instructions and trying to find the owner. I mean, we're trying to do our part when we can. It's not a big drop in the bucket, but we were able to at least keep them out of the shelter. It's just one thing. I myself was able to take a microchip reader out, and we were able to find the owner. It took a little while to get the information, but we were finally able to track down the owner, get the dog back to him, and then educate them about being dogs at large and so forth and stuff. So some of those instances, we treat them like loud parties. You know, the first time's a warning. You know, hey, if we have to come back, we're going to escalate this and so forth. So fortunately, we haven't had any second run-ins with dogs at large that we've dealt with on the first time. So we're hoping the owners did kind of secure their residence or the fencing and so forth. But anyways, we're trying to do what we can. As anything new, some of the officers are now starting to request the microchip reader now that they know that we have them. So it's just a little slow going. So hopefully we can keep more dogs or animals out of the shelter through that area. So I guess if they have public comment for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Susan Perry, 266 Buffalo Lane. What do your officers do with the dogs that they get to come to them and they scan them and they have no microchip? What do they do with them?
So we'll call animal control or the on-call officer, and then we just go from there.
So they go then to the shelter?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
If they're not able to come out, then we try not to during the heat of the season, but we do put them in the back to where, and let them know that there is a dog out the back that needs to be processed in.
Okay, because I know in the meeting in April, there was discussion somewhere along the line about getting people to take an animal in because most lost dogs are within blocks of their own home. And there's been a lot of people doing that, and there's been a lot of people getting stuck with them. And I know of one occasion where people were not allowed to adopt because they took in a dog and they couldn't find the owner. They had it more than 3 days. They turned it into the shelter, and then because owner surrendered a dog, they couldn't adopt a dog. So that was my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other follow-up or administrative issues for the committee? There being none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. I hear a motion from Member Aker and a second from Member Murphy. Calling for the vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned at 12:43 p.m.